been seeing a lot of headlines about this writer's strike. Nothing's particularly set in stone yet, because last I heard, there'd been a pretty overwhelming vote in favor of a strike. But the contract that the WGA folks still have is active until the 1st of May. So they're going to keep negotiating up until that point. But essentially it's a typical terms that they're after. They want pay increases. They want some new considerations in the advent of streaming, because it's been a while since they updated their contract, and the industry is obviously changing constantly. They feel like they're not getting enough money in the way of residuals, stuff like that. Are you worried at all that it'll get to be a strike like the one back in 2008, 2009, when they kind of shook the TV industry for a little bit?
I think it definitely will. I don't feel like Hollywood learns its lessons quick enough or eagerly enough. I don't know if you remember this, but did you ever watch Heroes back in 2008?
No, I was familiar with it when it was on, but I didn't get into it.
Okay. So that was one of the shows, and Friday Night Lights too, two of the shows that I really liked watching when I was in college, that got really, really affected by it. And I imagine a lot of shows will be affected by it. The one wrinkle I read recently was that the emergence of ChatGPT and AI can potentially write basic TV scripts better.
Yeah.
If not as well enough as the current writers.
That's a bit of a wrinkle, yeah.
Yeah, so that's going to be interesting, because I dislike safe TV, which I think a lot of shows have become now, and we'll touch on that when we get to The Mandalorian. But I am not hopeful, nor do I think they will come to a solution that benefits the viewers.
Yeah, because somebody was asking me about this week, in fact, when it came to AI written scripts, and, I think it's in its infancy right now, but
we'll get there one day.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Well, I hope that through this WGA potential strike situation, they work some language into their deal that addresses that, because this is the chance to do it, right? I mean, if they don't get into it now, I mean, they could find themselves in a bind later on when, Warner Brothers or whoever decides, hey, we'll try an AI generated script for once. What could it hurt?
It goes back to the point in The Matrix where the machines is only as good as the humans make it.
Yeah.
Or the fact that machines fail because humans fail.
Yeah. Yeah. We can only make them, as imitations of ourselves. So
yeah, or just the architect said, inevitably any failure that's made by the machines is probably due to human error.
Yeah.
If I remember The Matrix correctly. It's been a while since I've watched them.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah. That's classic pessimistic speech.
Is it pessimistic or just realistic?
I
think it rings really true. Anyway, that's my Debbie Downer moment for the day.
Well, on that note, should we get into talking about some movies?
Okay, fine.
Welcome to the Extra Buttery Podcast. It's a show about movies, TV, anything with a story and actors on a screen, really. Join Jason Chan and Robert Snow's free-flowing conversation with deep dives into characters and plot with the occasional salty opinion. So get your popcorn, I got mine right here. Let's start the show!
Welcome to episode 117 of the Extra Buttery Podcast. My name is Robert Snow in Toronto, and I'm joined by Jason Chen in Vancouver. Hello, hello.
Hi.
This time on the show, we're going to be talking about a whole whack of movies that we've been sort of catching up on in recent weeks, as well as some new episodes of TV. So we're going to be talking about Creed 3, Dungeons & Dragons, Honor Among Thieves, as well as John Wick Chapter 4, maybe a little bit of Mario movie, if we have time, and even Succession on TV, and The Mandalorian. So a jam-packed episode. We may only touch on a few of these for a few minutes at a time because, hey, it's been a while and we got a lot to get through. But should we roll back the clock all the way to March with Creed 3? Because I think that was the one that came out the furthest in the past. I haven't seen this one myself, but you have.
Have you seen the first two?
Oh, yeah, because we saw the second one together when it came out.
Did we?
Yeah.
I don't recall.
One of the times I was
Did you enjoy the first two?
Yeah, I really liked them. Like
yeah,
my reasoning for not seeing the third was just purely like scheduling, and it's available on streaming now, so I should really catch up. But
okay.
But yeah, I really enjoyed the first two. Like, I'm not typically a sports movie guy, but
yeah. Also, not to mention, maybe the last chance you'll ever see Jonathan Majors in a major production.
Yeah, except for we'll see what they do with any of the roles that he's banked in the past few months. But
I guess. I mean, if you're gonna recast Kang, might as well be now, right?
Yeah, there was a theory floating around that the guy had already shot some footage for Loki season 2, so maybe they'll let that go and then part ways
recast
with the
him
guy
for the movies. Yeah.
For those of you out there who don't know what we're talking about, Jonathan Majors has been credibly accused of domestic abuse, and there's been some recent news that he's been dropped by his management firm. So yeah, there's some distancing and some canceling on the go. So we will see what becomes of him and his career. But yeah, he's the villain in Creed 3. So,
well, villain's a strong word. Antagonist.
Okay, I was going to qualify it by saying, like, from what I understand from the marketing around Creed 3, it begins with Adonis Creed at the top of the world. He's the champion. He has proven himself over and over again. He's very wealthy. Things are going great for him. But then this character from his past, played by Jonathan Majors, comes back as a guy who he had been friends with, who ended up going to prison, and there's some bad blood between them to an extent. I believe like Jonathan Majors' character feels like maybe Adonis Creed should have gone to prison instead of him, or as well as him.
Sort of.
For what?
Yeah.
Yeah. But this ends up turning into a bit of a setup for a boxing match, because obviously Majors' character is in very good shape and feels like he can challenge the heavyweight champion.
Before I got locked up, I was the best. You a coward, bro, and a fraud. Try spending half your life in a cell, watching somebody else live your life.
I had to draw the line.
I'm just getting started, little brother.
I had to draw the line between my brothers and my enemies.
I'm coming for it all. He's not gonna stop.
Then you make him.
It's funny how in each and every passing movie, they kind of retcon Donnie's past as an easy way to set up this future boxing match where the beef goes back decades.
Yeah.
So in the first movie, you obviously had Sylvester Stallone and, his dad, Apollo Creed. And then the second one, you had Ivan Drago come back. And then this one, someone from Donnie's childhood comes back. So I don't know what's going to end up in the fourth movie. Maybe some kid in middle school who bullied him comes back. I don't know. But I liked the movie. I didn't enjoy this one as much as the first two. It might be because it was missing Sylvester Stallone in it.
Yeah.
Although I do appreciate Donnie Creed as a standalone character. I find him very interesting. And so the sort of father figure, mentor figure, I should say mother figure this time, is Donnie's mom. She plays a huge emotional role in this. Obviously, Tessa Thompson as the wife is also very much the emotional heart of the story. And then the daughter that they have, who was born deaf, who we were introduced to in the second movie. There is one sort of stylistic difference in this one that I didn't think it worked really well for me, is that Michael B. Jordan mentioned that he took a lot of inspiration from anime in filming the boxing scenes.
Right.
And you can kind of see it. It does feel a little bit like Dragon Ball Z, where, there's a lot of like flurry of punches and they move through all these sorts of settings, like they move beyond the boxing ring, but in more of a metaphorical sense, where the background changes and it's supposed to represent, a bigger conflict than just what's happening in the ring. So I appreciated that. I just didn't think it worked for me because it took me out of the ring.
Interesting.
I think part of the appeal of boxing movies is staying in the ring, being so close to your antagonist in the fight, and having the crowd noise really bring you up and lift you up. I thought that was a little missing in this one. I kind of missed it. I think I kind of prefer the traditional boxing movie with the crowd and everything.
Right.
I can see what he's doing here, but I think it's just a personal preference.
Yeah, because this is the first one where Michael B. Jordan has been directing, and Ryan Coogler,
Yes.
who had previously directed the other two installments, he was busy on, I assume, the Black Panther sequel when this was in production. So,
Correct.
The reins passed to the star, and I guess he decided to play around with some stylistic stuff to kind of distinguish himself a little bit. Is there any word on whether they're going to do a fourth one with?
I'm sure.
Okay.
I'm sure there'll be an expanded universe. I'm sure they'll do a female Creed boxer being, that being his daughter, who takes after him with the fighting.
Wouldn't they have to wait like 10 years or something for her to be old enough?
They'll just recast the role or something.
Oh, okay.
They did with Ant-Man.
No, I mean like
the daughter.
Like if for Michael B. Jordan to be old enough to conceivably be like her father.
He can just wear makeup,
Okay.
Because in this movie, he's already basically retired.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, he's kind of brought out of retirement by Jonathan Majors.
I see.
And so I can see that happening. Adonis Creed basically becomes the next Rocky, where he becomes transitions into the coaching part of his career. He already is doing that in parts of this movie. I think that's where it's going to go next. The problem with boxing movies too is that they end up really being cliched. You hardly ever see the good guy outright lose. Usually it's a pretty tough battle and there's some sort of moral victory, even if the decision's against them.
Yes.
The protagonist rarely dies in the ring. I think the only exception I can think of is $1 Million Baby. I don't know if you've seen that one.
No, I've always meant to, but yeah.
Okay, really good. The protagonist in that one ends on a bit of a sad note. That's the only one I can think of. But usually, there's some sort of like triumph over evil or triumph over self in these boxing movies. And so in that sense, it makes it a little cliched and predictable. But it's always fun to see like people beating the crap out of each other.
Yeah, I mean, like the original Rocky was the template, right? And you don't get any better than that final like winning knockout and the celebration afterwards. It can be infectious, no matter.
Well, he loses in Rocky 1.
No, I know, but like the sense of like the triumph, no matter if it was like a physical knockout or like an emotional one.
The emotional triumph is what makes Rocky great. Yeah,
the sense of triumph is kind of overwhelming and infectious, even though if you've seen it a few times, if you've seen that formula reused.
I wish you could see it on the big screen though, because some of the effects in regards to the boxing is better on the big screen, like the punches, the speed, some of the close-up cuts that you see. There's one point where Jonathan Majors gets hit by a pretty big uppercut, and I think it was a quick cut, so I couldn't really make out what it was, but essentially his teeth had gotten knocked out and it got stuck in the mouth guard.
Ooh. Oh.
And so when they pull out the mouth guard, the tooth was stuck in it. And he was just like a pool of blood in his mouth. I don't know. That kind of stuff just kind of gets me going sometimes. I don't know what that says about me.
Yeah, you're not
for someone who doesn't like gore in movies for some reason, like fighting injuries just doesn't, gross me out as much.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're essentially saying though that like not as good as the first two, but still enjoyable. Recommended.
Yes.
But then talking about fighting, I suppose we should segue over to John Wick Chapter 4.
Challenge you to single combat.
If you win, you'll have your freedom.
And when I see you, I'ma take what I want, so.
Amen.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You didn't watch most of the previous installments until more recently, right? Like you weren't watching them as they came out.
I didn't. I watched the first one in theaters, and then the other two I watched like later after theaters, like on streaming and whatnot.
Right.
But I had seen all of them before I went to this one.
Okay. Yeah. Because I remember talking about maybe one of like 2 or 3 or something with you, and you were like, "Oh, I haven't bothered with at that point you hadn't bothered with watching the sequels," and I was like, "No, it's actually like the world building and everything is quite interesting."
I think it was the third one you were
Could have
talking
been, yeah.
Because the second one was my least favorite.
Right. Okay. They come back with this 4th sequel, and I mean, I was impressed to see the initial buzz talking about it as like
me
one
too.
of the best of the franchise, which you rarely see about any 4th installment of anything. But I mean, I had a really good time. I will say though that the length was getting a little to me a little bit. I mean, I first heard that it was going to be nearly 3 hours long. I'm like, a John Wick movie does not need to be 3 hours long. I know that Chad Stahelski, the director, and Keanu Reeves, they love packing in as many like references to classic cinema and Hong Kong action and whatever the case may be. Like they are definitely movie fans, and they let people know with all of the stuff that they pack into their movies. But sometimes I feel like it can be a little self-indulgent, like some of the...
Oh, totally is. 100% it is.
Yeah. But that's not to say that the 3 hours that you do spend with this movie aren't entertaining, because there's always something happening. The thing keeps up a good clip. It does not drag. And here we are now at the end of the 4th one. There's an open question of whether they'll make a 5th one or if they'll just, focus on spin-offs. They've got a spin-off show that's set like in 60 years in the past or something that's set to come out next. What did you think of this 4th one? Do you think it was a good way to cap things off, or was it like unnecessary?
Sometimes it's hard for me to decide if John Wick is a comedy or action movie.
Agreed.
It's really tough to decide sometimes. Sometimes I don't know how I feel. There's this last part where John Wick is supposed to go to this final duel at Sacré-Cœur in Paris. And there's this long sequence where he has to walk up the stairs and fight a bunch of guys to get to that spot. And I remember at one point, they make a point of telling the audience, oh, he's got 2 minutes unless it's, too late. And I swear that sequence went on for another 15 minutes at least. And
it did. Yeah.
And then the part where like he continuously gets beat up, and the amount of hits that he takes with just like a little blood on the shirt or a little blood, coming down his forehead on the face, it's just hilarious to me. So that kind of got boring to me, for lack of a better word, because it seems like the stakes never felt real. I think that was one of the best parts in the first couple films, was that a gunshot to the knee incapacitated some people, or most people. In this one, they've introduced like bulletproof suits, bulletproof vests, and there's a bit of a funny moment where like Keanu Reeves takes off his suit and like you could hear like all the empty casings just like drop to the ground.
Yes.
And I thought that was really funny, but at the same time, I'm like, none of this shit is believable, and I don't care how clever the gunplay is. It's too played out.
That's fair. I mean, that's where I think you end up feeling the length a little bit, because
agreed.
As stylish as everything is, you do kind of grasp for something like more solid in terms of like the world. And
like,
because they threw out plausibility ages ago, especially when, in the second one, they introduced the bulletproof suits. That was the first time we ever saw them on screen.
Yeah.
And initially it was intended as like, oh, he has this small area that he can hold up in front of his face, like the front of the jacket, and he can block a few bullets. And they didn't really overuse it. But then by the time the 3rd and the 4th one rolled around, like,
it's a force field.
Yeah, he's going up against people who you're told are really scary international assassins who don't seem to be able to shoot him in the head no matter how close range they are,
Yeah.
So it does get to be like a little bit of like Star Wars Stormtrooper type stuff, just setting up like an endless wave of mercenaries for him to just dispatch with various martial arts moves or gunshots or whatever, and it just goes on and on and on.
I do appreciate how less gory they made it. Like, it could have been really nasty.
It was more like gunplay oriented, this one, compared to... There was a big extended knife fight sequence in the third one.
Yeah, but it's not. There's a lot of headshots and knifing, but there's no like blood spraying everywhere.
True.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, some of the fights are interesting, but the choreography just goes on for a little too long sometimes.
They're showing off, like they're proving that they can do everything in a wide shot without relying on editing to kind of put the sequence together. Like they know that Keanu and everyone that they hire can do the stunts for real. They can pull off these moves and they show it off. And so everything feels longer than it would if it had been cut down. And so, yeah, it's a question of like, okay, am I watching a story? Am I watching a movie? Or am I watching a really impressive choreography reel? You know?
So I was just going to mention the one scene that I just could not stand was the card game that he plays with the mob boss. Was it Bulgaria or something?
Oh, yeah.
Or Belarus or something like that.
Yeah, they're Belarusian, yeah.
Yeah, they play 5-card poker.
Yeah.
And it's the dumbest scene I've ever seen. It goes on for way too long. I mean, part of it, I think, is also because I felt Donnie Yen's character was a bit of a gimmick.
Yeah, I mean, I loved him.
I think he did some interesting things, like while fighting with the gunplay. Yes. But the whole blind man being such an awesome fighter, isn't this exactly the same character he played in Rogue One? Like, is it the same shared universe?
Yeah. It is very similar. And like, yeah, the shifting kind of allegiances got a little bit hard to keep track of. Like, is Kane actually going to kill John Wick, or does he actually have a soft spot for him? Like, you know, some of the back and forth gets a little bit hard to parse. The sum total of it all, though, is that it's incredibly well-made action that you're not seeing in almost any other franchise. So you have to kind of give it to them for that.
Yeah, I agree. Fewer reloading scenes, which I appreciate in the first film that they just kind of got away from. I felt that was just like a minor detail that really made John Wick stand out, was the amount of reloading John Wick did. Yeah. In this one, it really looked like he just never ran out of bullets.
True. Yeah. That was one thing that I used to appreciate about the earlier ones, was that, you know, they spent time to kind of show that, like, all right, it is possible for an action hero to run out of ammo.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I read a lot of reviews going to the film about how they talked about how it was building more of this continental universe.
Yeah.
I never got that feeling. I just got the feeling that the high table was always corrupt as it's ever been, and rules are pretty much arbitrary.
Yeah.
And like, it's cool we go to Osaka and see the continental there, but we don't learn more about the continental and its rules.
No. Not more than any of the other ones.
Yeah, and they openly, blatantly break the rules.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Like with the opening fight in Osaka, like they do it in the Continental.
Yes. So it's like, which I guess you're right. It does go a certain length towards proving the corruption of the high table and how everything is just guidelines. But yeah, it would be nice if there were more moments like the first one where, you know, when the one assassin played by, was it Adrian Palicki? She breaks the rules of the Continental and is executed for it. You know, it would be nice to if the lore was a little bit more tight and well respected in certain ways, you know?
Yeah. I kind of also wish that, not to say the cast was bad, I just wish there were more big name celebrities who make cameos as assassins. If they're just hanging out in the Continental.
Right,
you know?
right. Just like walk-ons.
Just walk-ons, because by the end of the movie, like by the time Keanu Reeves falls out of the building 5 stories and gets hit by a car 10 times and still walks away, and he's kind of walking with a semi-limp, by that time you're just kind of laughing.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
Yeah. I think you're
like he looks like a human pinball out there.
Yeah, I think you're supposed to laugh too, because that's happened to him before, and you're just supposed to be like, gosh, nothing gets this guy.
Yeah, which is weird because the first movie felt really serious at times.
Oh yeah, it wasn't until the second one that they started being very playful. I think the first one was approached as a more standard. I mean, it almost was like a direct to streaming action, like throwaway thing. And then it was only on the success of that one that they started building out the world to the extent that they have, and kind of inserting more of the comedy bits.
Not my favorite John Wick. Not by far.
Yeah, it's hard because I have to give it a lot of points for like technical achievement, but in terms of like the one, like a...
Did you laugh when they started, when they got attacked and they started coming back with like sumo wrestlers and arrows?
Yeah.
I thought that was hilarious, man.
Yeah, that was another like sense of humor type of thing that they have on the production team. But
Yeah, never bring arrows to a gunfight, but
I don't know. They lasted a pretty long time.
They did. But they ended up, I guess it was a moral victory.
No, but like, would I want to see more from this universe? I don't know. I think I'm not super interested in the Continental TV show, to be honest.
Why not? Isn't it on Ana Doramas, isn't it?
No, that's a different one that hasn't come out yet. There's the first one is the flashback show.
Okay. See, I'm already losing track.
I mean, I come to these movies for Keanu and the core cast, and I...
Okay. So speaking of Keanu, this might be his worst acting performance ever. I can't stand the way he talks. I can't stand the way he delivers his lines. And everything he says, it just sounds hilarious to me.
It was getting a little weird how like he was giving such monosyllabic answers to things.
I know.
But
yeah. Okay.
But again, I can't get too mad about it. I just I'm thinking about like, have I had a worse time at a 3-hour movie? Yeah, for sure.
What's the worst?
I was definitely more bored at Avatar than I was at this.
Really? Okay. Interesting. I think I was more interested in Avatar than this one.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, for me, I just...
They were both cliched as hell, in my opinion. Oh, so when's the last time, I guess spoiler alert, but when's the last time in a movie where Hiroyuki Sanada does not die?
Yeah.
He's like the Asian Liam Neeson.
He's getting to be, yeah, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah.
It even happened to him on Westworld, if I remember correctly. But anyway, maybe multiple times, given the way the robots on that show work. But anyway...
Yeah, a poor guy. Jesus.
Yeah. No, so I mean, if it's definitely not an easy film to jump into if you haven't seen any of the previous ones. You do have to kind of know a little bit about what's going on. But yeah, it could have been a much worse ending for the main cast, and it could have been, a lot more boring at 3 hours, and the fact that it wasn't speaks volumes about like Chad Stahelski and Keanu and everyone who works on these things. So yeah, I would recommend it to anyone who is even like a little bit familiar with the franchise. But moving along, because we have a lot more to go.
So much to talk about.
So much to go. Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves.
To give us a fighting chance, we're gonna need strength. You got this, right?
I know you don't.
We also need courage, magic, and you.
Does this get the award for like sleeper hit of the year?
No.
Why not?
Because I didn't enjoy it that much.
Oh. Okay, we're really diverging now.
Yeah, so I don't get the hype for this one, but you can take it away first. You're gonna have to convince me.
Okay, so we've got Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, which is the, I believe, third or fourth Dungeons and Dragons related movie in recent years. Although a few of those were either direct to DVD or direct to video type things. Like,
yeah, I was gonna say I only remember one other Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Yeah, and that first one also is not particularly well remembered. So, I mean, in terms of like critical and commercial success, this is definitely doing the best out of the movie franchise so far.
Yeah, that's just not debatable.
And I think what this one has going for it is just a bunch of people working behind the scenes who are not ashamed of making something related to Dungeons and Dragons. They acknowledge that this is like a very nerdy property with a lot of flexibility in what they can do. Like they can have kooky races and a blend of comedy and action and all sorts of fantasy elements that might seem like a mishmash in a different franchise, but here it's kind of like a sandbox. They can just sort of toss stuff at the screen. So it's clear that like the people who are working on this movie are having fun. And I don't know, I think that sense of fun that from the set kind of carried through to me, because it's just a band of rogues who are, they are motivated mostly by money, but then they get drawn into this typical save the world from evil sorcerers type of plot. And they become like slightly better versions of themselves as a result. And yeah, it just didn't take itself too seriously, which I guess I appreciated from the perspective of somebody who has never played Dungeons and Dragons with like a game night type of environment, but I didn't have any investment in the characters or the world, and it was my first time really watching it. So it was kind of nice to just sort of feel like nothing was being expected of me, that I could just, laugh at the jokes and appreciate the fantasy scenarios and just sort of see where it took me. But it sounds like you found it a lot more kind of formulaic.
I like you. I've never played Dungeons and Dragons. Not nerdy enough to do it. I was always busy doing other things that I had more interest in.
I had real friends.
Exactly. No, just kidding. It was just something that never occurred to me. Just like, I'm not a big board game guy, so I walked in not knowing what to expect and not expecting anything in particular. I was a little surprised the amount of good reviews it had gotten. And when I walked away from it, I think you're right. I felt it was a little formulaic. Other than Chris Pine's character, and only probably because it was played by Chris Pine, I didn't feel like any of the characters were really memorable. The villain was definitely not memorable. I found the plot just a tad bit hard to follow. Maybe it was because you start the movie off where he's talking about what happens in the past, and there's a bunch of narration, and then he kind of jumps to the present, and you kind of go along with the journey. There's a bit of a shifting alliance there, but it was more of a sleight of hand type deal. And I just felt like it was a good fantasy movie. I've just seen better. I've seen movies with magic and creatures that I felt were more exciting. The humor didn't really hit with me. Partially also because I don't find Michelle Rodriguez a particularly good actress or particularly funny. So maybe the point was to be a foil to Chris Pine, who is more of like the crowd pleaser, the charismatic lead. But that didn't really...
I think she's deliberately playing like a wooden type, or more wooden. I mean, she's supposed to be this barbarian character that he hangs out with, and she's the muscle, he's the brain kind of thing.
I just didn't think the chemistry was as great as people said it was. And some of the effects were cool, but I didn't think it brought any new elements. The part where they jump into this cube and they kind of freeze?
Yeah.
I thought that was the only thing that was kind of interesting, but I also felt like it wasn't that interesting in the sense that it felt like it was something that I'd seen before, or that it didn't have as big of an impact on the movie's plot or the characters as I thought it should have. I thought it was just a cool visual effect. And we're at the point where having good visual effects isn't enough. Like, to me, a good visual effect that makes a lasting impression has to work itself into the plot somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I was impressed with the level of practical effects that they included here. Like, there are certain costumes, and there's things like the moment where they get trapped in the quicksand when they go to confront the villain played by Hugh Grant. A lot of those were done for real in camera, and not to say that they're more convincing than digital effects, but it's just nice to know that they figured out how to do it for real. So there was like a technical achievement of some kind there.
Also, I didn't feel like Hugh Grant hammed it up enough.
No, he
Nicolas Cage would have been way better.
Well, the problem with Nick Cage though is he would have chewed so much scenery that you would have been like just waiting for him to come back, and you wouldn't care about the heroes anymore.
Well, I think that's kind of what's missing about this, is that none of the villains were memorable.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that Hugh Grant could have turned up his performance a little bit. He was more interesting in like Paddington 2 than he was here. Which is kind of saying something. The witch was, she's just like the conduit for all the evil magic stuff. So she's kind of a means to the end. It was fun though to see at the end sequence where they all team up finally. They kind of learn how to work together, and they fight her in unison in this big like one shot.
I guess. Again, see
that was an interesting on like a technical level. It visually striking, but
cliched and played out. Don't you think? Like,
No,
wow,
no,
this team, wow, comes together at the right moment and defeats the evil witch with their powers. And this evil witch, no matter how powerful she is, ends up getting her ass kicked by 5 random strangers or however many it was.
Well, you know that they're going to be victorious. Like, there's no like tension there, but.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough.
I'm talking about the way it was shot, like just the fluidity of the camera work and that stuff. That was impressive.
Okay, fair enough. I wasn't as impressed as a lot of other people were, I think. And I think this is one of those forgettable movies that we won't talk about in 2 years.
I don't know. They made a lot of money, so they may.
Well, there will be sequels, and I hope the sequels will be better. But this particular film, I think, if you ask me 2 years from now what happens in it, I'll be like, I have no idea.
I think, honestly, I think they should go with the route that they've been doing with the Godzilla movies, the MonsterVerse movies, where they're not stuck with a particular set of human characters from movie to movie.
Agreed.
Just have because Dungeons and Dragons has a lot of people getting together at in basements, like playing these games out, and so the core group here is supposed to feel like a crowd of like 5 friends who are playing the game together and having a quest. So I think the next one should be a quest with a totally different roster of characters. And who knows, maybe they'll get some cool actors who you wouldn't expect to be in something like this. And maybe those particular characters will connect with you a little better. I don't know. Because I mean, it's interesting for Chris Pine specifically to do something like this, because this feels like something he would have chosen to do as like a younger actor, not the kind of place he is right now with his career. Anyway, it's a fun little surprise, for me at least. I'm curious to see what they do with the franchise.
Mm-hmm. I think that's more interesting to me, is what they do with the franchise.
Yeah, I think if they end up coming back with a sequel with the exact same cast, I would be less interested in it. I probably wouldn't watch it in theaters.
For sure.
So, that's just my 2 cents. Have you seen the Mario movie?
I have not. And I'm like debating this because I kind of know what to expect. I am a fan of Mario.
I don't think you're going to enjoy yourself.
Oh, I'm not? Why is that?
Well, I mean, I think you'll see it for what it is, which is that it's a kid's movie.
That has Mario characters, yes.
Not sure if you know who I am, but I'm about to rule the world.
Wow, yay.
But there's one problem. There's a human, has a mustache, just like you.
You think I know every human being with a mustache wearing an identical outfit with a hat with the letter of his first name on it? Because I don't.
When I went to the theater, so I went to see John Wick, and the theater was packed. For a weekday night, I was like shocked.
Yeah.
But then I realized that like 90% of the people at the concession were actually going to see the Super Mario movie, and they were all like my age. They were like no kids.
The thing is making crazy money all across all age demos. It's it's a real.
I think that speaks to the lasting appeal of Mario.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
because you have such a wide demographic, you can't take many risks.
No, you're certainly not going to see like a gritty reboot of Mario for something like this. They don't have the trust of the audience yet. After the dumpster fire that was the early 90s offering with Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo.
Cult classic. Excuse you, Robert. Okay.
Because the one thing you can say about that movie from the 90s is that they went with a big swing. They wanted to kind of make it more adult and spooky and very much against the source material.
Yeah,
but
they had some crazy ideas. This one plays it safe, and that's why I think it makes so much money. At the same time, playing it safe doesn't interest me that much.
That's why I say you're probably not going to like it. I mean, we
talked about the same with Dungeons and Dragons and Creed, right? There are times where they play it too safe, in my opinion.
Yeah. So this one plays it incredibly safe. I mean, it's very faithful to the games. It is for all of its 90 minutes, it is racing to include every single Easter egg and reference it possibly can. It does so with like incredible style. There are moments where they imitate like side-scrolling style video games, and it definitely conjures up like the feeling you would have playing a game like that. Like it nails that, and it gets all of the other details incredibly right. Does it work as a story? Is it engaging any more so than like playing a game? No, not at all. Like you could have the exact same amount of fun just playing the game or one of the, you know.
I am glad though that finally movies based off of video games are getting good reviews or at least doing well.
Yeah, because between this and The Last of Us, you know, it's showing that it's not an impossible thing to adapt.
Yeah, and Dungeons and Dragons too, right?
Yeah.
Like not a video game, but I mean, it just shows that there's a lot of potential.
Yeah, you just have to have the right approach to it. You have to, like, I don't know, acknowledge that it's a game, or I don't know, it's a complicated screenwriting problem, you know?
And I think Nintendo's just like found a new revenue stream that could be potentially fantastic, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, it is what it is. I think we're just going to get more of this. I do remember we got an Angry Birds movie a while back, right?
Yeah, nobody liked
that. So are we going to get
though.
like a Candy Crush movie?
Maybe.
Or what other mobile game is fun these days? See, I don't even know. But I think there's so many movies that they could make, like Donkey Kong. And it started with Sonic, by the way.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Props to Sonic. Like, I actually enjoyed Sonic. And some of the storylines and some of the stuff they did stray away from the video game itself.
Yeah, but it still remained like a passably entertaining movie in spite of that. So,
yeah. After a bunch of like public backlash over the original design.
Oh yeah. Very well deserved though.
Right.
But yeah, so I mean, the Mario movie, I mean, for you could probably catch it when it's free to watch on Prime or Netflix or whatever. Like it wouldn't, there's no reason to see it in theaters, but
I feel like though it's a movie that you should see in theaters with people who are more excited to see it than you.
Maybe.
Just so it can like bring you up a little bit. Like if I'm watching this at home by myself, I'd be like, all right, I'm bored.
Well, you can.
Did you have a good time though?
I mean, I had a good time. I mean, I've been a lifelong fan of the Mario games. So for me, there was a lot of like,
who isn't?
There's a lot of recognizing all of the Easter eggs. You know, that's fun in the moment. And there is one character in it who I guess maybe setting up a sequel potentially. Like, did you ever play the Super Mario Galaxy games for Wii?
No. Who's the character?
Well, it's Mario, but it's a typical Mario platformer. But there's these little star guys that are, they're sort of supporting characters in those games. And there's one of those who pops up in Bowser's Castle at the end of the movie. And he's like got the voice of a child, but he keeps saying all these really depressing things. So there's this like, Bowser captures a few more characters and this guy pops up in his little cage and he's like,
ooh, fresh meat for the grinder.
Pay him no heed. He is cute, but he is.
There's gotta be a way out of here.
There's no escape. The only hope is the sweet relief of death.
Whoa! Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
Those moments were like, I legitimately had I love that character just for the juxtaposition.
I really like characters, not to make fun of mental health and people who are affected by it, but characters who we assume to be joyful, like kids or like young characters or idealists who like end up becoming really depressed, really I find really, really funny.
Yeah, okay. So you will like this character then. Because...
So do you remember what was it? The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Alan Rickman's depressed robot?
Marvin the paranoid android.
Yeah, he is the best part about that movie. I laughed so hard.
Oh God, I love that guy.
Marvin, I've been talking to the ship's computer and it hates me.
And it's kind of like Debbie Downer, like the characters you don't expect to be, downers or depressed. They end up to me being like a really good source of comic relief. I don't know what that says about my like really morbid sense of humor sometimes.
Hey, I mean, if you've got the morbid sense of humor, then I've got it too. So,
anything to bring the party down a little bit, I find really hilarious.
Yeah, well, that's what this character in the Mario movie is designed to do, right? Like,
it's kind of like, hey, you're too joyful and happy. Tone it down a notch.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm hoping that like they have more of those little guys around in the sequel, and it becomes a whole thing that like they're supposed to be happy, cheerful little star guys, but they're all like cosmically mentally destroyed or whatever. Yeah. That would be great. Well, should we change gears over to TV then?
Okay.
What do you want to talk about first? Succession or Mandalorian?
Let's leave Succession till the end. We should end on a better, higher note.
That's true.
So the thing with Mandalorian is, at what point did it become a freaking kids show? At what point did it become more Obi-Wan than Andor?
I would say sometime in the mess that was like the Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
It made that leap. I don't exactly know how.
Being a Mandalorian's not just learning about how to fight. You also have to know how to navigate the galaxy. That way, you'll never be lost.
Book of Boba Fett was a bizarre show that in some ways...
Sorry,
it
sucked.
It had some moments in it that where I was like, wow, this is some really cool stuff I'm seeing, but then everything else was so weird.
Can I just point out that I don't think Mandalorian was supposed to go on for this long?
Yeah.
I think it was supposed to be a short, contained miniseries ending with Luke taking Grogu away, and that was supposed to be the end of that.
Yes. Yeah.
But somehow they couldn't get away from how successful this thing was, made up a bunch of stupid storylines, made up a bunch of, like kidsy stuff, like, oh, look, a monster took another kid away. I'm like, dude, another kid? Like, how long has this been going on for?
Yeah.
And yet you still let the kids play by the water? Like, this is like Jaws levels of stupid,
Yeah.
Like, hey, look, there's a killer shark in the ocean. Hey, let's have these kids go out for a swim. Like, what the hell, man?
That particular planet they chose to live on was not super smart.
Yeah, I mean, there are some legitimately interesting things, like when they had to go to that pool of water.
Yep. On Mandalore?
On Mandalore. I thought that was a really interesting part of the lore, a really thrilling adventure. And I kind of thought the rest of the series would go like that. But then they go back to their little, camp, their little village or whatever it is. And then they introduce this beast and this kid that they have to rescue. And it's just like random curveballs, like, oh, we can't be too loud. Oh, we can't use our rocket, jetpacks.
Yeah.
And it's just like, none of it makes sense. The only reason it exists, these obstacles exist, is to make things harder for the protagonist. But there's no rhyme or reason to it. It doesn't feel organic.
Yeah, I think that's the best critique you could make of it, is that it's not organic. Like, the setup from the previous season was that we're building up to this retaking of the planet Mandalore by these characters, and they're going to rebuild their ancient civilization and, reclaim a certain amount of the respect that they once commanded, et cetera, et cetera. The writers are kind of trying to delay that climax by having all of these fetch quests and side quests and monster of the week type action, which The Mandalorian has done before. There's been plenty of monster of the week stuff that's it's, so in some ways it is like a monster of the week type show, but it got really noticeable here. And then of course you've got Grogu running around constantly in the background, and the cute factor is just off the scales. So it starts to undercut the original sort of gunslinger, bounty hunter premise that the show was launched on.
I don't feel like the Mandalorians really deserve their reputation. I mean, it took 30 of them to bring down one beast, and like 1 or 9 out of 10 get chomped up and killed easily. It's just, they don't seem like an elite fighting force, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, they have a chance to redeem themselves in the finale, which just came out today. But
okay, I guess I'll have to continue watching. It's hard for me to bring myself to watch it because I found the episodes in the current season, most of them really stupid.
Yeah, it gets better once they bring in an actual overarching villain.
Okay, and there's just too many Mandalorians. Like, I feel like that's part of the problem. It doesn't seem too exclusive.
The number of Mandalorians who you're going to meet is about to like quintuple or something. Like, there's so many of them. They have there's this whole crew of Mandalorians run by, that was previously led by Bo-Katan, and they meet up with them on another planet, and they have all these ships, and it's a real fleet of Mandalorians. So it's supposed to be thrilling, but you do make a good point. Like, there's a question of like, are Mandalorians more interesting when they're lone gunslingers who are mysterious, the way Boba Fett was in the original trilogy, or do they lose some of their luster the more of them there are, and the more we learn about them?
It's the same exact problem as the Jedi Knight problem. There's just too many Jedis. Really, there is. And it just seems like not all of them are particularly good at their job. You know?
Yeah, I mean, we learned that in the prequel trilogy. Like, there were certain Jedi who just, got their asses handed to them by stormtroopers.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait a second, I thought this was supposed to be a more a different matchup.
The thing with Star Wars too is that they never understood that less is more. All they want is more, but they don't understand less is more. Like, it's just too much of certain things, and they try to be too many things, and they just lose focus.
Except when they make a show like Andor. Andor proves that they can do things differently.
Yes.
They just choose not to.
Yes, Andor is so focused though, eh? Like, it's focused on one tiny problem and one character.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so great.
When the Mandalorian first came on, it had aspects of Andor in the sense of
for sure, yeah,
being like a very kind of focused show. But yeah, they've been steadily weaving in more of the kid-oriented stuff, and that's fine. I mean, the Mandalorian can change over the course of the run. It's just it's not exactly what we were sold on originally, and it doesn't give you the feels the way Andor does.
The commoditization of Star Wars, and as a vehicle for merchandising,
yeah, I
think that's one of the biggest issues. How would you sell Andor as a toy line? You can't.
No, you can't. It's and yeah, therein lies the problem for them, right? I mean, they can't completely shut themselves off from that revenue stream. So,
Not to say Andor was perfect, but it was as close to like a dramatic miniseries as we've gotten.
Yeah. So more of that. I mean, I'll continue watching the Star Wars shows. I as you know, I have a soft spot in my heart for them. Even Ahsoka looks good. I mean, God damn it. I said to myself months ago that I wasn't going to watch it. I even said to myself that I wasn't going to watch Andor, and here I am.
Well, Andor was good, so that was a good leap of faith. I'm not so sure about Ahsoka.
Ahsoka's got those like maybe bad guys with orange lightsabers who look really cool. So I don't know.
Again, I highly, highly recommend that you track down Genndy Tartakovsky's Clone Wars.
Oh no,
2D animated
I've watched
version.
all of that. Oh, it's great.
Yeah, so awesome.
Yeah,
those are really great Star Wars stories.
And we have Star Wars Visions. There's some cool stuff happening on that show too.
Okay, yeah. Explain to me. Is there a new Star Wars Visions? Wasn't that the one with like the Japanese anime style?
Yeah. So the first one was independent shorts. Like
those were cool. Those are really cool.
Yeah, I watched all of those. They've got a new season coming out. It's going to come out on Star Wars Day, May the 4th, of course. So that's coming out in the coming weeks, and it's going to be a new collection of different animation studios, and I think they've even got like a stop motion one in this season. So
cool.
I mean, one of the cool things about that show is that it's not burdened by any of the existing lore, so they can just tell a random story that
or so you think.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm sure
until they write themselves into a corner and then a Skywalker shows up.
Yeah. Mandalorian showed that can happen. So we will see. But so our final topic of today. Something that has not written itself into a corner just yet.
Well, it's ending, right? So
it's ending. So it's trying to go out on a high note, and that is Succession.
He's on the floor, Tom.
Explain to me what he's doing.
He's moseying, terrifyingly moseying. It's like if Santa Claus was a hitman.
We were cut out behind our backs. But there's a shape for things for us. We partner up with Sandy and Stewie, with Pierce. Death wrestling ogres.
Excited to get into this knife fight?
Let's blow it up.
I don't think we've ever really done a big segment on Succession before, because I think it took me a while to catch up to where you were. And then the show was kind of on hiatus for a bit, but now it's obviously back. And they had so spoilers ahead for season 4, episode 3, because that's got a really big moment in it. If you have not watched it, please pause and come back later once you've watched it. Don't just forget about us. But yeah, did you see the big death coming? I guess is the best way to.
Yes, because if you read the behind the scenes stuff, Logan was supposed to die in the first season. Hence the name Succession.
Yeah, so they have this whole setup where they think he's going to die. They're scrambling in the first episode to adapt to this stroke that he's had.
Yeah.
But then of course he's revived and he continues and makes more trouble for his children.
Yeah, because he's the perfect foil for his children.
Yes.
The children aren't really foils for each other. Not as well as Logan Roy is anyway. I'm glad I was on this series from the start. It's a brilliant series. In some ways, though, I do feel like it's kind of turned loose in terms of some of the characters. It has become more crazy, dramatic, and out of touch in some ways, I think. And specifically, I refer to the Tom Wambsgans character.
Oh, okay.
He has such an odd and specific way of talking. And him and Greg have this weird relationship that I can't get a hold of, that I can't really pin down.
Right.
That is very unique to them. And I think that's what makes it interesting to watch. But at the same time, it's also sometimes hard to follow, like, because they speak in code, right? Like Kendall's a bit of a straight shooter and you kind of know what he's going for. With Tom and Greg, it's a little more cloak and daggers. Like they speak in code sometimes. And it's hard to figure out if Tom is toying with Greg or if he genuinely believes that Greg is his only friend in the family. And for some reason, he chooses to treat him in a certain way so that he can keep Greg in check. At the same time,
I think it's the latter.
You think it's the latter? Because at some point, Greg's got to grow a pair, right? Like, he's so feeble sometimes. And it's just like at this point, you're kind of tired of watching him be a mouse.
True, but I will say that over the course of the past all of the episodes, you do see Greg marching steadily towards being a more evil version of himself than he was at the beginning.
Oh, yeah,
so, like,
for sure, yeah.
The longer he spends in the orbit of all of these bad people, the more he learns to be self-serving and scurrilous and all. He picks up all of these techniques, and there's a small tragedy playing out with like watching Greg become this nastier version of himself, and that's partially due to his exposure to Tom, who was previously the main like whipping boy for the family, but now he's got an underling that he can have as his whipping boy.
Yeah.
So they kind of play off each other. It was interesting actually to see a little fun marketing thing that the two actors, Nicholas Braun and Matthew McFadyen, did, where they swapped roles and they read each other's scripts over the course of like a 3-minute scene or something. And it was funny because it was never convincing. Like, Nicholas Braun has a hard time playing Tom, and Matthew McFadyen has a hard time playing Greg. And it was like you can see how like it needs to be the way that it is. They can't swap.
Yeah, that's why they cast the people they did.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I can't see Jeremy Strong playing Roman.
No.
Like it just wouldn't work. I don't think I'm enjoying the season as much as I have in previous seasons.
Oh.
I feel like the dialogue has just been a little harder to follow. There's a lot of subplots that are going on, that makes it a little difficult to follow as well.
Yeah.
And Kendall's a bit of a loose cannon sometimes. Like, he weaves in and out of sanity and insanity a little too often.
Yeah.
Not that it's a bad thing. It's very interesting to watch, but he's always like a hair triggers away from like going off the deep end again.
Yeah.
And you always think that this time is the last time he goes off the deep end. Like, he's seriously going to hurt himself. And Roman too. Roman's an interesting character to me.
Well, he comes and goes too, because he has these moments of allegiance to his siblings and a desire to take Logan down, but then he also can't. Being the youngest sibling, he feels like this affinity to Logan that is hard for him to escape. So
yeah. So the thing with Roman is that there's a massive layer of insecurity that's underlying his entire performance.
Yes,
and I think, other than Shiv, who I think is a bit of a straight shooter, I think Roman is the one where I can like understand where he's coming from all the time. Kendall's way too fluid. Like, he doesn't switch allegiances all that much, but he's like a cokehead. He's manic with all these weird ideas that are just disparate. And the way he talks about like, oh, this is Amazon meets, Square or whatever, like it's very like tech bro speak.
Yeah.
And it honestly seems like he never kicked his coke habit.
No, I think that's definitely implied.
Yeah, and Shiv to me is interesting because she's clearly got the deck is stacked against her as being like the only female, the only one who's like really worked outside of the family business, and she's got this weird relationship with Tom, and I think she might be my favorite character throughout the whole thing.
Oh.
It's a tie between her and Roman, I think.
Yeah, I don't know who. My favorite character might be Greg, actually, just because I'm kind of
oh
from a comedy.
He's so annoying
from a comedy level, but also the watching the tragedy of him like screw up his life by not getting free of these people.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is tough to watch him like implode, right? Because it's coming.
Yeah. So yeah, he might be my favorite character, but I did see an interesting critique, and this was leveled more at season 3 than season 4, but it could probably still apply. And that was that this critic thought that they had started writing the show with the interest of creating like quotable moments that would be clipped and shared on social media. So they felt that the individual scenes were starting to break down, and it was all about like setting up a 1-2 punch type of banter that played better in like a 15-second format than in a 1-hour TV episode. Do you find that at all?
Not really, to be honest. I still find it's a very quotable, memeable show, from like Tom making fun of people's man purses to Logan Roy stepping on boxes of paper to make a big speech and saying F you to everyone. I still find it that way. I think some of the side characters are a little distracting. I can't remember the guy's name, but the one with the beard and who's balding.
Oh,
who's often working with the publicist.
Oh yeah, that's Hugo.
Hugo, right. I find Hugo a very weird character.
He is weird.
Yeah, there's a joke where Logan Roy's girlfriend is auditioning to be the anchor, and it goes really poorly, and then he walks into this meeting room and Hugo's like actually secretly making fun of her while watching this clip.
Yeah.
And there's like this whole extended played out joke where like Logan realizes what Hugo's looking at, and Hugo's kind of being all awkward about it, and it just feels really forced. And anytime the characters really do something special, they just tell Hugo to stand in the corner.
Yeah.
So he's not really important, and he's not really comedic relief. So it's tough for me to understand what he is.
He gets an interesting moment in the most recent episode. I will say that.
Okay. So I'll have to watch that. But one of the more interesting characters to me from a viewer standpoint is actually the publicist,
Carolina.
I feel like there's layers to her that we don't know about.
Yeah.
Because she's always the most even keeled, and I really wonder what kind of person it takes to be such an even keeled person.
That's a good point.
In that environment.
Yeah.
Because everyone is off the balls crazy.
Yeah.
And her allegiances never waver, it seems like. Like, she works for Waystar Royco, and it never wavers. She's never playing for the other side. She's just doing what's required of her. She's working in the best interests of the company. And she's the straightest shooter in a show about people with no allegiances.
Yeah. I almost want them to build up to a point like in the penultimate or the final episode where she finally loses her cool and screams at everyone. And it'll be like, whoa, okay, we finally got to Carolina.
Yeah. But I don't know. Going back to Logan's Death, did it really surprise you? It was interesting the way they did it.
It was interesting the way they did it. I I knew that there was some big revelation coming because I didn't see it the night it came out, and there were a few days in between, and there was just the tone of people talking about it on Twitter was such that like, oh, okay, some big plot moment has happened. I don't know what it is. I assume it would have to be a character's death, but so I had that preconditioning. For most of the, like, once they started in with the stuff about him being like on the plane but not officially dead yet, I was like, and maybe this was just from all of the years of watching the show, but I kept thinking like, wait, is this a play? Like, does he have like a dummy on the floor and he's hiding in a closet somewhere and he's trying to get one over on the siblings by pretending to be dead and then, faking them out? But then, yeah, they've committed to that now. So it seems like, it is the way they say it is.
It never occurred to me that Logan Roy would do this just to stick it to his children.
No, it's always about like making the company better and getting more power for himself. But
exactly. For him, it's about money and power. It's not really the emotional side of things that he cares about. In fact, I would say he doesn't care about any of the emotions that go into running his company at all. So it never occurred to me that he was playing a prank or anything like that. It was interesting to me that he died off, he had the heart attack off screen.
Yes.
And they had played out whether or not he is dying for like the entire episode, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah.
It got to the point where I'm like, okay, we need to stop with the freaking out and wondering if he's dead or not. I thought it was more interesting in the final 15 to 20 minutes about how the siblings dealt with it versus the news that it got leaked versus the effect it had on markets versus the effect it had on the siblings and the trust structure and all that kind of stuff. I thought that was the more interesting part of the episode, and maybe they'll get into that more.
I think they will, because like it's going to be a standard length season, I think. So the fact that they have the death up in the third episode means that they still have 6 or 7 episodes to go after that point to get into all of the actual succeeding, I guess you can say, the paid basis of the title, right? So
the fact that they're calling it quits after this season, though, I think tells me that they've got an ending that they're happy with, that they've settled on.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, they must.
So it's the only reason, and it's the only reason why any show ends well is when they call their own shot.
Yeah, yeah, and they don't just get kneecapped the way.
Renewed and renewed for another season. They have to come up with all sorts of crazy stuff. This is how you get like main characters to go down a road that was never plausible. Like in Weeds or Ozark, where like the protagonist becomes like a major drug dealer or a freaking murderer. Like it doesn't vibe and jive anymore with what happened in the first place.
Well, on that uplifting note. That about does it for this episode. Come on back next time and we'll have even more to talk about. Probably, will I get Jason to go see an Ari Aster film with Beau is Afraid? You will find out at the same time as me.
No.
No. You're not even a little bit curious about what some have described as a career-killing film?
Okay, maybe.
It's not a straight-up horror from what I can tell.
Yeah. Okay. Fine.
All right. Well, until then, my name is Robert Snow in Toronto.
And my name is Jason Chen in Vancouver. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
The Extra Buttery Podcast is written, recorded, and produced by Jason Chen and Robert Snow. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to rate and subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice. And remember, popcorn is always better with extra butter.